Everybody kind of wants to talk about alcohol. It's a really engaging topic, but people don't want to talk about their own drinking.
You know, I'm much more productive, I'm a better friend, you know, I'm a better person to be around.
Am I having an alcoholic beverage just because my mates are, just because I'm in a pub and that's what's expected, or do I really want one today?
And I think for so many people, alcohol becomes a habit. It is addictive from the first drink.
There's this space that's created in your life that you fill with good things.
Hello to all of you watching and welcome to the latest episode of Bupa's Inside Health series. I'm Dr. Zoe Williams and today our topic is rethinking drinking, exploring how more awareness around our own drinking habits can make a huge difference to our health. According to data from DrinkAware, in 2024, 90% of UK drinkers were trying to moderate their drinking in some way. And more people are also joining the Sober Curious movement. And despite the name, Sober Curiosity isn't necessarily about quitting alcohol completely. Really, it's about exploring and understanding how drinking affects you so that you can call the shots. Making an informed and personal choice about if, when and where you want to drink. Coming up today, we'll be speaking to our Sober Curious experts about their experiences. We'll be addressing some drinking myths and running through the real benefits of cutting down and also providing you with tips to enjoy life with less alcohol. At the end, we'll also be trying to answer as many of your questions as possible, so please do send your questions in on the chat and stay tuned for that later. But before we get started, let's take a trip to the High Street. The team and I set out to see just how clued up we are about our drinking, from the nation's drinking habits to the effects that it has on our body. So let's take a look. In the UK, 63% of adults drink at least once a month. But how much do we really know about our drinking? Don't shout out the answer unless you've buzzed. Excellent. Oh. If you start reducing your drinking, which aspect of your health and well-being would you see the quickest improvement? A, better skin, B, better sleep, or C, better liver function?
I would definitely say C, better liver function.
Yeah, C.
It's sleep. How many young adults between the ages of 18 and 34 believe social pressure to drink is widespread? Is it A, 40%, B, 50%, or C, 60%?
A, 60%.
Yeah, you're right.
I went to uni, so I kind of saw it there.
How much would you have to drink for it to be considered a binge? Is it A, 3 large glasses of wine for a man and 2 large glasses for a woman? Is it B, 4 large glasses for a man and 3 large glasses for a woman? Or is it C, 5 large glasses for a man and 4 large glasses for a woman?
B? Yeah, I was going to go B.
It's A.
Oh.
Excellent. From my perspective, it was interesting to see just how much people really know about their own drinking, particularly when it comes to things like how it affects our sleep. I think for most of us, there's still a lot that we're unsure about, and that is where our experts come in. Today, I'm joined by Sober Curious TV doctor, best-selling author, and mental health ambassador, Dr. Alex George.
Thank you.
Alex is a passionate advocate for sobriety, having been alcohol-free for just over 2 years now himself. And I have Dr. Richard Piper here as well. Richard is the Chief Executive of Alcohol Change UK, a charity focused on reducing alcohol-related harm. And he himself is now dry by default, which means he'll only drink an alcoholic drink if he has a really good reason to do so, never out of habit. And he hasn't had a good enough reason for 6 years. So Dr. Alex and Richard, welcome to Inside Health. Since you both have lived the experience, I thought it'd be really good to ask you questions about your own experience. Perhaps we could start off, if you could tell us a little bit perhaps about your own journey and your attitude to drinking and how it's changed. We'll start with Alex.
Sure. So for me, as you said, it's been over 2 years since I decided to stop drinking alcohol. I think I grew up with this kind of auto-enrolment into drinking that you have, I think, in this society, you know, especially growing up in Wales, sport and rugby. It was assumed that you drink, and then I went to university, and so much drinking culture in universities around, you know, going out and having drinks. And then I think I got to the point when I was kind of 31, 32, where I'd kind of gone from using alcohol to socialise to using it to cope with things like stress. I was trying, which we can come on to later, whether it helps with stress is a very different story, but I was trying to use it to cope with stress, but also with things like grief as well. And so alcohol suddenly took on a very different thing for me. And although I wasn't addicted to it, and I wouldn't say I was at the rock bottom stage, I think I was heading towards there. So for me, it was about going, hang on, do I want this life? What does life look like? What is it that I want to have out of my time here on Earth? And I realised that so much benefit will come when I stop drinking. And I remember sitting down one day at the chair of my barber's on the 4th of December 2022, and I looked in the mirror and I felt kind of like, now's the time. I'm fed up with this. I want to change. And I stopped drinking. And for me, it was abstinence. It was stopping drinking. And the changes that have happened since have been, life-changing. I think it's absolutely changed my life. I've lost 7 stone in weight. I've taken on new hobbies. I'm, running the London Marathon this year. I feel like a different person. Stopping drinking doesn't remove life's problems, but it does give you a lot more capacity to deal with them. And very important, it gives you much more capacity for joy, which is something I'd like to talk about today.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. And Richard, your experience?
Yes, I mean, not dissimilar, I suppose. I started drinking when I was 15. I think at that age, 15, 16, you're so desperate to fit in, aren't you? Yeah. I had periods when I had friends, but I had periods when, particularly at that age, where I was kind of moving friendship groups. And suddenly I discovered a friendship group, and the thing that united us was alcohol. And suddenly I really felt fitting in. I felt connected. We always knew what we were doing on a Thursday night, on a Friday night, on a Saturday night. And then over the years, it became a real habit. And I think for so many people, alcohol becomes a habit. It is addictive from the first drink. It is a very addictive substance. So, but we're not told that. We're not necessarily told that. I wasn't aware of that. And I just saw it as completely the normal thing to do, to drink. And I was probably drinking, particularly once I had young children. You're suddenly starting to drink at home, and suddenly that £10 note, it's gone a lot further. Well, it shows my age, all contactless nowadays. But yeah, £10 note, get sometimes 2 bottles of wine for that. Yeah. So much more than when you're drinking out. So my drinking went up then. Right. And alcohol's like a ratchet. It goes up, but it's very hard to bring it down. And by the time I got to sort of my mid-40s, I had a little period when I was looking for a new role. I applied for a range of jobs. I nearly got a few, and I did get the job at Alcohol Change UK, and I was so over the moon. I came down, I said to my family, I've got the job at Alcohol Change UK. My wife was delighted, my elder daughter delighted for me, and my younger daughter said, do they know about you? I thought, what does she mean? Oh my God, it dawned on me, she was talking about my drinking. And then I suppose at that point, I kind of like all the little thoughts, the little ideas that maybe I'd been drinking too much kind of just coalesced. And I just, a bit like your moment in front of the mirror, my mirror was my child. I just said, I've got to sort myself out. I've got this job. And then, of course, as a social scientist and as a behaviour change specialist anyway, suddenly I was exposed to all this amazing data and information. And then I had my reason. I suddenly realised, I want to live old enough to see my grandchildren. And I kind of told myself that was my North Star, and that kept me going. I tried Dry January, then tried moderating, and then realised, dry by default was the way forward for me.
What's really interesting about that is that it was your younger daughter that raised that, which kind of brings me on to my next question, really, which, from my own personal life and working with patients, there's a lot of awkwardness when it comes to talking about drinking. And Richard, you must get a really good insight into that from your work with the charity. Why do you think some people still feel so uncomfortable when talking about alcohol generally, and especially when talking about cutting down? Yeah,
it's so interesting. And I think what we find is that everybody kind of wants to talk about alcohol. It's a really engaging topic, but people don't want to talk about their own drinking. And that's the thing. And the reason for that, the research is fairly clear on this, is because there's such a strong historic stigma and people feel shame around having a drinking problem. And the main reason for that is that we've got this myth, this completely false myth, that there's a binary. There's people who've got alcohol dependence, sometimes called alcoholism, and then there's everybody else, and the rest of us are fine. And that's a really historic view. It's not at all scientifically accurate. And the new view, I think science has worked this out maybe decades ago, but now it's really filtering through into the public imagination, is that there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum of harm, there's a spectrum of drinking, and there's a spectrum of drinking problems. And we as an organisation focus specifically on those people who are not yet alcohol dependent, but are on their way there, exactly like I was, like you were. And actually intervening earlier can be so much more empowering. So I think the conversation is moving, but yeah, it's taking time, and we still have a lot of shame and stigma. We need more stories from people talking about it, like you've done, and like I'm doing, to kind of cut through that rubbish, really.
So, Richard, we did a bit of our own research here at Bupa and found that out of 2,000 people, more than half are planning to reduce the amount they drink in the next 12 months. And do you think attitudes towards drinking are just generally changing in the UK?
They are changing, definitely. I think for a lot of people, the halo has slipped a bit from alcohol and the mask has dropped. And I think people are seeing it for what it is, a bit of a substance that does cause harm and isn't essential to life. What we know is that a recent survey that we've done, over a third of people feel alcohol is negatively affecting their mental health, their physical health, their energy levels. Around a quarter say it's badly affecting their sleep. So I think there is a kind of growing awareness that alcohol, even at low and moderate levels, does cause harm. And I think that's really helpful for people to understand that fact. We also know that there's a bit of a generational gap in that. So people who are concerned about alcohol, that figure is about 43% amongst 18 to 34-year-olds. So that's a group that's really more concerned. But the over 55-year-olds, only 18% of that group are concerned about the impact of alcohol on them.
Right.
And what's interesting is that that's the group that experiences most alcohol harm, partly because of a lifetime of drinking and drinking heavily, but also because, as we talk about, as you become older, obviously your body's just aging. Yeah. The effects of alcohol on it are more serious.
Yeah,
so that's a group that ought to be more
recover and recoup.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Alex, I think there's a lot more awareness of the importance of mental health in general, but also the links between mental health and alcohol. Did you ever have the so-called hangxiety, and did that play a role in your decision to stop drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hangxiety gets that term of like the feeling you get the next day of being anxious, worried about what happened last night, can you remember everything, feeling unsteadiness, maybe the heart's racing. It's triggered by the alcohol that we consume, and it's not really surprising if you understand the fact that alcohol does have a significant impact on our brain. It actually causes depression to a level as well. But yeah, the anxiety the next day is awful, and it can be crippling. Particularly if you're someone who has anxiety anyway, or you're struggling with mental health and you're struggling with mental illness. Alcohol doesn't really help with that, and I think it's a really important thing that people have to kind of ask themselves. It's like, how do I feel? With alcohol in my life, how do I feel with it? Am I generally happy? Do I wish that I felt a little bit more calm and a little bit less anxious? Do I feel like I want to achieve more of my dreams and things like that? And then it's questioning, well, what role does alcohol play here? And for me, it was, the drink was causing more and more issues in my life, but certainly anxiety was one of them. And it wasn't just one day then. It would be, if I had a drink on Friday night, and I had 5 or 6 drinks on a Friday, I'd be anxious Saturday and Sunday. And I often think that the thing that really woke me up in some sense was, how much time am I losing to this? If you're hungover one day a week, that's 52 days a year that you lose effectively to that. And if you're anxious in that time, it's rubbish. It's a rubbish way to live. And yeah, for me, that was a big reason. Greater sense of peace, 100%.
That's really interesting. So I think for anyone who is thinking about cutting down themselves, Alex, what are some of the challenges that you've faced becoming sober curious and ultimately stopping drinking altogether?
I think, look, the world is changing, but we're still in a society that's very pro-alcohol, and even if you see sometimes people's reaction to the conversation about sobriety, it's like, oh, you're spoiling the fun, or you're being boring, or you're pushing, you're being preachy. Actually, the preaching comes from the alcohol and pro-alcohol movement, if we're honest. That's what you see across sporting events and all these kind of different things. We are seeing tightening up, obviously, legislation around that now, but we're very much pro-alcohol in this country. So you kind of are still a little bit moving against that tide, although I think the tide is turning, which is really exciting. I think other challenges are, that's a macro level, and a micro level, your kind of family and friends. Like, how do you socialise? Was alcohol involved in a lot of your day-to-day living, or how you mark certain occasions? And it's quite hard to change that. And there's a bit of shedding of skin and the acceptance that things will be different, and sometimes difference can create a little bit of discomfort. I think some of the other challenges as well is that just the setup of how we do things often revolves around alcohol, you know, from like the way that we, you know, socialise after work and things like that. So not just family and friends, but work situations often revolve around alcohol. And also there's an expectation, as I said earlier, that we'll mark certain occasions. So when you get married, alcohol is going to probably be there at the wedding. If someone passes away, you often have a drink after they passed away. So I think a lot of it is going to be, you know, realising that, you know, it's not always going to be easy. Not everyone's necessarily going to be on board. There's definitely going to be a learning curve for yourself. And you do actually, I think one of the biggest things that people don't talk about is that you do actually have to go out there and make your own fun in a way. Alcohol is actually a really easy way to get dopamine. You know, it's why you feel good. You drink alcohol, dopamine's a reward hormone in our brain. Boom, dopamine, it feels great. We have chocolate and things like that as well. Other ways we get
short
dopamine,
period of time.
up and crash. Other ways we get dopamine, exercise, going out for a long walk, spending time with people that we really enjoy and love, learning a new skill. Lots of those things require effort. So often we say things that require lots of effort is probably good dopamine. Things that are very quick and easy, perhaps not so much. But that's definitely more difficult. Take away the easy stuff, you have to do hard things.
Yeah. But despite some of those challenges that you've highlighted, there's definitely increasing number of people who are interested in cutting down their drinking, even just compared to a few years ago. So there are obviously some big benefits too. What's been the biggest positive impact on your life, do you think?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the change and the shift is huge. And I think young people are really driving a lot of that. They want to live in a different way. They're questioning the auto-enrolment, as I said earlier on, and they're realising the benefits. You know, for me, removing alcohol doesn't take away all of life's problems, but it does allow you to have greater capacity to deal with challenges, but also to have room in your life and capacity in your life for joy. You know, I'm much more productive. I'm a better friend. You know, I'm a better person to be around because you're someone that's calmer. You're just someone that's more centered in your life, and I think that has an effect on everyone around you. You also get to have this beautiful thing where you stick at things you promise, you know, and that you commit to. So, you know, when I stopped drinking, I wanted to start running. You know, I'm doing the London Marathon this year. I've run 4 races last year, half marathons. I've stuck at the gym for the longest I've ever done. You know, I picked up new hobbies like playing paddle and stuff like that. There's this space that's created in your life that you fill with good things, and the knock-on effect to your mental health is incredible. So if I was going to say the one big thing for me is the benefits to my mental health. Huge.
Okay, that's really interesting. So another thing that I noticed from Bupa's research is that almost 40% of people who've cut down say that it's had a positive impact on their relationships, relationships with their loved ones. So Richard, do you think this is something that you found to be true?
Absolutely the case. So I find that personally, first of all, I would say that, you know, my relationship with my family is massively improved. I'm more present for them. I've got more time for them. I remember, you know, years ago reading a bedtime story for my daughter. All I could think about was the glass of wine waiting downstairs. Was I in the moment? Of course I wasn't. And do I wish I was? Looking back, of course I wish I had been there finishing the story. At one point I think I fell asleep while reading a story because I'd started drinking before going up to read that bedtime story because, I'd been cooking and justifying it. So, being present, but also being present for friends and family. I find it much easier to listen to people and not want to be the one to talk. I'm able to process better what people are saying and listening to. It's no secret that alcohol affects your brain functioning in that moment. So being clear-headed is clearly better for those relationships. And our research shows that, it's one of the things that really people most value long-term is that shift in relationships. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. So as you said, change isn't always comfortable. I think it would be a lie to say it's going to be a breeze. But that discomfort can lead to better quality relationships, particularly I would say with friends going out. Majority of my friends now going out are drinking less or drinking not at all. And I would say all of us are having at least as much fun, if not more, than we used to do. Really? And we remember it next day. Yeah.
So that's your personal experience, and then do you hear lots of other accounts of this as well? Yeah,
definitely. So I think people talk about changing relationships, particularly with their intimate partner, with their husband, wife, cohabitee, whatever. Those relationships, they can be difficult if those relationships are built on alcohol or if alcohol is a key part of that relationship. But there's so many people on our forums. We have around 50,000 people who've joined our forums over the years who've done it together as a couple. And I kind of think that's a really powerful kind of change process. And actually, there's lots of things they're not doing together, but they're doing this big thing together. It can be really powerful and positive. I think with friends, if you're the first person in your friendship group, we get quite a lot of research shows that you're having to be quite brave. But actually, a lot of your friends around you you'll think they're judging you. We have this thing called sober shaming that you've touched on, which is where people expect you to drink, and we worry about that, and sometimes it's very real. But what we found, some of our research, is actually friends are actually admiring your change, sometimes quietly, sometimes silently, but they are kind of watching you, and you're making this shift, and you're being a bit of a leader of your group. So I think, I think there's some really interesting research out there.
And I have to share, in my really close-knit group of girlfriends, we've been friends for a long time. We've had lots of years of going out and drinking. I kind of a friendship that's been built on alcohol, really. And one of my friends, shout out to Jenny, she completely stopped drinking a couple of years ago. And I have to say, all of us just have nothing but complete admiration for her. And it's been really interesting. And I think she's inspired all of us to be more mindful of our drinking as well.
Yeah.
Finally, one last question to both of you, actually. What's the one piece of advice that you give to someone who's considering cutting down their alcohol use? To you first, Alex.
I think the biggest thing for me is to understand your why. It's like having the sense of purpose. You know what it is that you're looking for from this new life. I think that's really important because it helps you feel motivated, but also helps you when you need a bit of discipline as well, because you might have cravings, you might have moments where people are like, come on, have a drink. But if you remember, deep down what the intrinsic reason, what that reason is inside that it's important to you, you're going to stick at it. And for me, I wanted a more peaceful, happier and healthier life. And I always used to remind myself, this is why I'm doing it. When it's hard, and sometimes it is hard, that is the reason that I keep going.
That's great. Yeah, I really agree with that one. And I'm going to be really cheeky and do 3, but I'll keep them really short.
Go on then.
So I would say take people with you if you can. Yeah. Take your friends with you, take your family with you. And if they're not going to be supportive, keep going anyway. This is your journey, it's your health. Secondly, hold yourself accountable. There's so many great tools out there. I particularly recommend the Try Dry app, which has had over 1 million downloads. It's completely free, really high quality. And that allows you to track your drinking and also track your goals, your achievements. And it's really motivating.
The Try Dry app.
Yeah, so if people are using things like Strava or Garmin or something like that, it's the equivalent of that for taking control of your drinking.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, I would say alcohol-free drinks, particularly alcohol-free drink equivalents. Obviously, Coke and orange juice and tea are great, but for a lot of people, we do want those adult tastes. I don't want to always be stuck at the back with a warm glass of orange juice, and really good quality alcohol-free drinks, particularly replacing the alcoholic version, can be a swap rather than just a removal. And we know from behavioural science that those swaps make a huge difference. So embrace those. If they're triggering, stay away. But if they, for most people, they're a really powerful part of that change journey.
Thank you both so much. Thank you for being so open and honest and willing to share your own experiences as well, because I think that will really strike a chord with many of the people viewing. It has with me, so thank you. If you have any comments for Alex and Richard, don't forget to drop them in the chat and to stick around for our Q&A later. So we've heard from Alex and Richard about the impact that mindful drinking has had on their lives. But now let's focus on how it can make a difference to you by starting with some quick myth busting. So I'm going to be reading out a series of statements about drinking, and our experts, Richard and Alex, are going to tell us whether they're true or false. But of course, you can get involved too. So just give us a thumbs up if you think it's true, or a thumbs down if you think it's false. You can find the thumbs up and thumbs down emojis right under the video screen, so you can join in. All right then, so myth busting, let's start with Alex. The first one, this is something I hear a lot. Having a drink helps me sleep. True or false?
Unfortunately, it's false. It's kind of a tale that we've heard for a very long time. And the reason is because alcohol does work as a sedative. It makes us sleepy and enter a sleep-like state. But on the inside, what it does, unfortunately, is it stops our brain going through our sleep cycle. So you hear it as non-REM and REM cycle. We want to go through that 3 or 4 times in the night. It affects the ability to cycle through that, and therefore it stops the important functioning of sleep. So sleep helps us deal with things that have happened that day. It helps our brain recover. It helps us recharge. And that's often why when you wake up the next day and think, wow, I slept for like 10 hours. Why am I still so tired?
Yeah.
Because you've gone into a sleep-like state, you didn't sleep well. So sadly, it doesn't help.
I think since I've started tracking my sleep, I've noticed a huge difference. Even if I just have one glass of wine with dinner, you know, seems quite fine. The difference, the impact it has on the quality, and especially, as you mentioned, those sort of REM stages of sleep is massive. So it's really made me rethink whether or not it's worth it.
Another interesting fact, we run the Dry January Challenge, Alcohol Change UK, and if you ask people up front what are the benefits they're looking for, sleep's quite low.
Right.
When you get to the end of the month, what benefits have you experienced that you enjoy? Like sleep bang at the top. I didn't know how bad my sleep was, and I didn't know what a difference it was making to me.
Right.
I remember when I started, cutting alcohol out, my wife said, "Oh, you're like a little bunny in the morning now. You're like jumping up and down and like take it down a bit." But yeah, it's true. Before that, I thought being sluggish in the morning was adulthood. I thought it was adulthood. I didn't realise it was my drinking.
Wow. And people often report having really vivid dreams when they're in that stage of first cutting down or stopping as well, don't they?
Yeah,
So
that's very true.
If you get that, that's normal. Don't worry about
normal.
it. Next question then, one for Richard. Interesting. Okay, now this one is, drinking red wine is good for your health. True or false?
False. So
Sadly for
no alcoholic drink is good for your health.
Yeah.
Let's be really clear about that. The reason why the red wine myth, because it's a myth, has taken hold is because red wine does contain, red grapes, let's be clear. Red grapes contain something called resveratrol, and they also contain antioxidants. So there has been a kind of this leap to say that, if you're drinking red wine, you're getting those two things. Well, first thing is hardly anybody is deficient in those particular resveratrols or antioxidants. So very few people are deficient. So you wouldn't really need to replace it. There's no health benefit. But secondly, most of the evidence is that you'd need around 100 drinks to get that. You can buy a supplement. You can buy a little supplement if you really are deficient in resveratrol, or eat a grape, have some red grapes or red grape juice, all of which will give you way more of the benefits without any of the harm. So yeah, I'm afraid it's a myth.
So if it's 100 drinks, even if there is this teeny bit of benefit, it's massively outweighed by the detriment of the alcohol.
Yeah, it's a net harm that is huge.
I think sometimes as well people talk about how these blue zones where there are people in certain areas of the world who are more likely to live to 100.
Mediterranean diet, you mean?
Very healthy, but they tend to have a very healthy diet, they socialise, they're physically active, they have a sense of purpose. And whilst they might have that small one glass of wine a day, it's not that that's given them the health benefit, it's that the other stuff is massively outweighing it and counteracting it. So we're really clear, there is no health benefit to alcoholic drinks, but you can, that doesn't mean to say that you can't live a healthy life with sensible drinking. Yeah. But there's no benefit.
Yeah.
So if
and the healthiest form is no alcohol.
Yeah.
The less you drink, the healthier you are.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Good. Right then. Next question for Richard. Most drinking is done at home. True or false?
That's true. That's true. Around 73% of alcohol consumed in the UK is consumed in the home. What they mean is sold in shops and then drunk somewhere. I'm sure a small amount of it is drunk in parks.
Yeah.
but let's just say the vast majority of that will be drunk in home. The reason for that is, of course, it's cheaper. Yeah. It's cheaper. And actually the supermarkets are making a huge killing on alcohol. And those of us that worry about hospitality, we actually need to be looking at what the supermarkets are doing, like lots and lots of promotions, and the cheaper the price of something is, the more people drink it. So it's kind of no surprise. And one of the main issues with drinking at home is, remember, obviously people can pour larger measures. In a pub or a restaurant, you're getting a specific measure that's been measured for you. But also, what people find is that they very, very commonly, and many of our audience tell us this, that they buying 1 or 2 bottles of wine like in a weekly shop at the weekend, expecting that to last the week. Yeah. It's all gone by Wednesday because once it's open, alcohol's addictive from the first drink. So of course they're getting through it, and then of course they're popping out on Wednesday to a corner shop to get or the local supermarket to get another couple of bottles. So people are drinking more than they intend to, not that they more than they intend, more than they plan, because they've got it in the house.
It's so easily done, isn't it?
So easily done.
There. It only takes one moment, a thought, oh, I fancy a glass of wine. Before you know it, it's open, it's poured, and then a lot. I know I've certainly myself am guilty of, if me and my partner are having a glass of wine, there's only that much left in the bottle, we might as well finish it. And that's what people do, don't they? It's very easy to fall into those types of habits. Yeah. So Alex, question for you. Women and men process alcohol differently?
Okay, so this is true. So on average, women and men will process it differently. And in the past, we had the guidelines saying 21 units and 14 units for women. So 21 for men, 14 for women as the lower risk guideline. What we've seen now is we've brought that to be 14 units. And the reason that is that it's not that 15 is a huge change or 13 is a massive difference as well, just dropping under. But when we plot the graph of what harm it might cause, at 14 units, we're starting to see a real uptick in risk of things like cancer, heart disease, other problems that come with drinking. Of course, as you said earlier, the best amount of drinking to have is 0 units a week. That's the healthiest. So the further down that scale you are, the less likely you are to have health implications and so on. So that's why. I mean, it's also much easier as a public health measure to talk about, because 14 units or 21 units? Understanding 14 gives people something to work towards. Staying under. But again, importantly, don't see that as a target. It's not all or nothing. If you go over 1 week, it's not about being hard on yourself. Be compassionate, be mindful around it and understand the risks. That the general trend is the more that you drink, the higher or more likely it is you can have problems as a result of the drinking.
Yeah, and I think it's that knowledge, isn't it? Knowledge is power. So having that number, 14, understanding what that means and starting to have a comparison to what you drink just gives you a bit of information as to where your risk level potentially is. But also, I think, if your drinking is creeping up, or if actually you're becoming more sober curious and your drinking's going down, you can then sort of keep an eye on that and analyse it much better, can't you?
I think so. I think the awareness point's important, because a lot of people that you said with the measures at home, they don't really know how much are they drinking, how many units, are we consuming, and a lot of the time I think people think that it's lower than it actually is, especially if you're, free pouring, say, a glass of wine. You might be thinking, I'm having a medium glass, but actually it's a double, isn't it?
The amazing national stat that if you take all the amount of alcohol that people report drinking and all the amount of alcohol that is actually sold, there's a massive difference. And that's not because people...
Where's the missing?
Some people are lying to their doctors to survey, but actually it's mainly lack of recall.
Yeah.
And it's lack of recall particularly after the first or second drink, because people simply don't know. Yeah. And that's where, again, the Try Dry app is allows you to track that, and your point knowledge is power. Keep a real close eye on it. You can set a moderation goal in the app, which allows you to stay under 14 units a week and have 3 or 4 days off a week, which is another key part of those guidelines, and really take control of yourself.
Yeah. This one's for you, Richard. It's harder to have fun without alcohol. True or false?
That's false. So when we completed the Dry January Challenge this year, we did a big survey of the people who'd done Dry January, and we asked them what they'd learned over the month. And there were loads of learnings. I feel like better in my health. I feel like I know how to avoid certain situations. I learned what my triggers were, etc. But the number one learning was it's possible to have fun without alcohol. Right. So we know that it's definitely possible to have fun without alcohol, and we talked about how great life can be without alcohol, but so many of us don't believe that. So many of us have bought this myth that you need alcohol to have fun. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't pleasure from alcohol. It doesn't mean it's not possible to have alcohol and have fun. It is. But it's also possible to not have alcohol and have fun.
I think there might be people viewing this, because I guess there's a certain type of person who gets involved in Dry January, and there are maybe people who don't. And I do just wonder if there are lots of people viewing this thinking, I can't imagine a life without alcohol being as much fun. Yet what we hear from people like Alex and many of my friends and people that I follow on social media, it's always the same message, that actually they do tend to find more joy and more fun after cutting down or completely stopping alcohol.
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people who just can't imagine that sober lifestyle being fun?
Yeah. Well, first I would say it doesn't have to be a completely sober lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think one way to do it is experimentation and curiosity. So if you think, I'm going to go out to the pub with my mates and we're going to drink alcohol, and you'll have fun. Fantastic, that's great. And you might particularly have fun for the first or second drink, but you might find as things go on, the evening actually becomes less fun. But then do an experiment. If you actually do it with your mates, we'll all go out, go to the same pub, same night of the week, with the same vibe, the same shirt, the same perfume, the same aftershave, you know.
But do you wash it in between?
Sit at the same table, yes, if you want. Sit at the same table, but this time have alcohol-free drinks. I think what most people find, and it's just they've never done it, they've never tried it, is that you will have as much fun. Now, the vibe might be slightly different, and the first couple of drinks you might be a little bit more awkward, a little bit more anxious. But what you might find sort of hour 2, hour 3 there will actually be better and richer. You'll be remembering your conversations. You won't all start shouting over each other, fewer trips to the toilet. So all the things that kind of make an evening a bit more complicated or a bit messy aren't there. And I think the point is you can have fun. So be curious, try stuff, and the Try Dry app is fantastic for this because it has a load of missions you can do, music festival, going to a dinner party, going to the pub, having an alcohol-free beer, even things like birthdays, Christmas, holidays, things that a lot of people will find it hard to imagine those things without alcohol. You don't have to do them forever without alcohol, but just try them once. That's what curiosity is about.
Okay, great advice. Thank you both so much. That was a fantastic myth-busting session. I hope that was enlightening for all of you having a go as well. Let us know how you found it in the chat or if there was anything there that surprised you. Okay, now let's take a look at the positives. So what are the real and sometimes surprising health benefits of drinking more mindfully? Often when we think about alcohol and health, our mind can skip ahead to some of the bigger, more serious impacts of drinking. Alcohol does increase our risk of over 60 diseases, from liver disease to cancer. And according to the World Health Organization, no amount of drinking is ever truly safe. But instead of focusing on what you could lose, what could you gain from a more sober, curious mindset? In just a couple of months of cutting down, you could feel a whole range of health benefits. So let's look at 5 of the top ones. In less than a few months, you can find that your skin looks better. Alcohol is very dehydrating, and this can cause your skin to lose the fluids and nutrients needed to keep it healthy, elastic, and more youthful looking. And your brain function could improve. Cutting down can help you sleep better. It can be easier to focus, and it can help you get rid of brain fog. Alcohol can also interfere with the hippocampus, which is in charge of memory. And your mood will likely improve as well. Alcohol is a depressant, and regular drinking can change the chemical balance in your brain, interfering with neurotransmitters like the feel-good chemical serotonin. And this can make you feel anxious, depressed, and even aggressive. In Bupa's own research, 47% of people said reducing their alcohol intake made a positive impact to their mental health. So cutting down can really help with your mental health, and it can make you feel more resilient. If you've got any stomach troubles or extra weight that you want to lose, you could notice a difference here as well. Alcohol is surprisingly high in calories, and it can also interfere with your metabolism so that the calories you are consuming aren't shifted as quickly. Drinking 3 fewer pints of lager a week could save you a whopping 540 calories. That's the equivalent of 3 bags of crisps. And cutting down can put a stop to acid reflux and indigestion. And finally, it can lower your blood pressure and heart rate too, reducing your long-term risk of things like stroke, heart disease, and dementia. So just to recap, those 5 things, within a few months of cutting down the amount you drink, you could see improvements in your skin, brain, mental health, stomach, and your blood pressure. As you can see, there are lots of reasons why it might be worth trying more moderate drinking if it's something that you're interested in, whether that's for your physical, mental, or social health. And if any of you have seen health benefits from cutting down, let us know in the chat. So now it's time for us to take some of your questions. It's been fantastic to see just how quickly the chat has filled up and how much this topic has resonated with all of you. So let's get some answers for you. So the first question, Alex, I think this one's for you as somebody who's fully embraced the sober curious lifestyle. The question is, I've decided to take a break from drinking, but I'm worried what my friends and family will think. How should I tell them?
So I think, first of all, that's awesome that you've made that decision, that jump. It's a really exciting thing to do. I'd say, first of all, just remember and understand your why. I think that's really important for you going through this process. I keep saying this point because I think it is really important. And also when you go into that conversation, you kind of know where you're coming from, and to explain to them, this is why I'm not drinking. And I think the important thing to say is that just, remember, you don't have to go into huge detail even with family and friends. You can have boundaries around what you want to explain. But I think it is useful, telling them or making it clear to them what is it that you expect from them. Yeah. So, from a friend, it could be like, look, I'm stopping drinking. I'm not expecting you to do that. I just want to let you know because it's important to me, and I'd love a bit of support. I can chat to you about how it's going at points. And I think by doing that, you're making it clear what it is that you are wanting from the relationships you have. One thing I think is really important to remember, because lots of people worry about this and think, what are they going to think of me? We have this thing called the spotlight effect. We think that kind of, and I don't mean this in a rude way, we think the whole world's kind of about us. And it is, because you're in your own head looking out on the world. Yeah. But actually people don't worry about it as much as you do. They've got their own lives and things they're doing. We think, oh God, they're going to judge us for not drinking. Most people, especially if they love you, certainly, they won't. There are some people who are in your life who will be your kind of drinking buddies who perhaps won't want to hang out with you as much if you don't drink. That's a fact. But the truth is that's okay, because you're on your own path, they're on theirs. And I think sometimes you've got to accept that when we change, some people will come with us and other people will go in a different direction. And that is actually okay. That is okay. And it's not hiding away from it, it's just accepting as part of the process. But the people that love you, your friends and family, I think they'll embrace it and they'll be proud of you.
I think that's really, thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes people knowing that ahead of time can just make it easier if those situations occur. If there are some friends that disappear into the background, but that was going to happen, it's easier to accept, isn't it?
Of course.
And Richard, would you have anything else to add to that might help in that situation?
I think probably just to build on that point, I think it's such an important point, to say this isn't easy. And I think this is a change. And some people in our groups, in our forums, they talk about a sense of, almost a sense of grief for the past version of themselves and also the past relationships they had. So I think like any grief, you be aware that this can take time and it isn't easy. Because I think focusing on the benefits is amazing, but also accepting that change will be hard, I think is just, or can be hard, I think is actually healthy.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next one, so this one's about menopause. I think I'll probably take this one. And the question is, how does alcohol affect menopause symptoms? Now, I know that a lot of women will actually use alcohol as a way of self-medicating, because the symptoms that come with menopause all at the same time can include things like anxiety, low mood or mood fluctuations, poor sleep. Certainly getting off to sleep can be difficult. A lot of the symptoms actually, I think as well, the nervous system is very much on edge. A lot of women going through perimenopause and menopause might still have young children at home. They might have older parents that they're looking after and working. So sometimes having a glass of wine or more at the end of the day can be what they turn to. But what we know is that for some people, actually drinking can exacerbate the symptoms of menopause, especially when we think about things like hot flushes, night sweats, sleep disturbance, sexual function and mood as well. So whilst I completely understand that reaching for the bottle can be tempting, it's not always the best or healthiest way to manage those symptoms, and there are lots of potentially better ways, things like meditation, mindfulness, relaxation and exercise as well. All right, then, next question. We've got a question here about drinking less while socialising. Maybe one for you, Richard. This is what they're saying. I've got a big birthday party coming up, but don't want to end up overindulging. Do you have any tips to help me watch how much I'm drinking?
Yeah, great. So I think first of all would be to make a plan. And I think, when we talk about sober curiosity, we think too much about the sober sometimes and not enough about the curiosity. So I think one good, really healthy plan for a birthday party is to think, you know what, I'm going to try this one alcohol-free. Only this one. I just want to try it and I'll see what it's like. So see it like an experiment almost like a little mini challenge to yourself. And as I mentioned earlier, the Try Dry app, it has these missions in it, and it has a birthday party in there. So you can pick birthday party, I'm going to give it a go. So that would be one way to do it. And I think if you were deciding to try and be alcohol free for that birthday party, I think you want to probably make sure you're planning what you're going to say if people are pushing drinks onto you. Maybe if it's at someone's house, take along your own alcohol-free drinks. That can be really helpful. Take stuff you like, and then you kind of avoid a lot of the conversations that you can have. But also, plan what time you might want to leave and how you're going to get home. I think these sorts of things actually really help a lot of us. A lot of us will benefit from that kind of plan. If, on the other hand, you were saying, look, you know what I want to do, I do want to drink, but I don't want to drink too much. Yeah. Again, the key to that is planning. A common technique is to start alcohol-free. So maybe do 2 or 3 alcohol-free drinks, and then later on in the evening, if you feel like it, you can have that glass of wine or that alcoholic beer if you choose to do so. Some people will choose to, some people not to, but don't feel pressured to. But you've then got less of the evening. Yeah. Other people like to flip it and like to have a couple of drinks at the start, alcoholic drinks at the start of the night, and then stop. But I think a lot of people find that harder.
Hard to not keep going.
And then there's a third technique called zebra striping, which is you kind of flip every other one. Right. That again can be quite helpful. You can have an alcoholic drink, and then it doesn't have to be a non-alcoholic beer. It could just be water. Alcoholic drink, glass of water. Alcoholic drink, glass of water. Quite simple, but actually you've drunk half as much, and probably getting home in a better state and hopefully feeling a little bit better the next day. So make your plan for which of those you're going for, and then have a plan for how to deliver it.
Okay, and the key thing with all of those then is the planning beforehand, isn't it? It's making a decision, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and then sticking to it.
And going back to that point about curiosity, it's then reflecting afterwards.
Yeah.
It might have gone really badly. Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
But what went badly? What would I do differently next time? So that's what we mean, I think, by this curiosity point. It's like, or it might have been amazing. And you go, wow, I actually really like not drinking. I had a better evening, or I didn't, or whatever. So reflect afterwards and help that create the next plan.
Yeah. It'd be quite helpful to do the 2 drinks of non-alcoholic at the start as well as a test, because a lot of the reason people say they drink is to help with social anxiety, especially if they're going to a party or an event. And actually, if you allow 10-15 minutes, you will just naturally settle in. There's this feeling that I need the alcohol to relax and enjoy.
Courage, as we call it.
Exactly. But when you go along and you go, actually, I'm going to feel these feelings and allow a bit of this anxiety, lean into it, because anxiety doesn't kill us. And remembering, anxiety is the intolerance of uncertainty. Or uncertainty at this point is, am I going to be okay? Are people going to like me? How is it going to go? Lean into that, and you'll find that dissipates and fades. And you might even go, well, actually, I'm really relaxed, I'm having a great time. I can't be bothered with the drinks. Give it a try.
Really good tips there. Okay, so this next question is about staying motivated, and it's for Alex. I stopped drinking a few months ago, but recently had a slip, and I'm finding it hard to get back into sobriety. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, and I think this comes to the all or nothing thinking that we naturally have as human beings. It's like, I've been to the gym for 6 months and I've missed 2 weeks, it's all a waste. And my point here with that example of the gym is, have you not just benefited hugely from that 6 months you've been to the gym, or was it actually a waste? Well, of course, your mental, physical health, your productivity, all those things will have benefited. If you've had 2 weeks off the gym, no problem. Brush yourself off and go back and pick it up again. And I think it's the same, with alcohol and sobriety. If you've had a drink, don't beat yourself up about it. Be compassionate. What would you say to a mate? You'd say, oh, well, don't worry. Just pick up where you left off. You've clearly benefited from all that stuff, otherwise you wouldn't have done it, and now you want to go back to it. I think it's really, really important. You actually made that point, is sometimes we are very binary about being sober. You're either sober or you're drinking. And of course, if you've made the choice that you want to live alcohol-free, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that straying in that middle bit is like a disaster. But that's my thought anyway, don't you think?
I think completely agree with that point, and I think that being an occasional drinker or perceiving yourself to be an occasional drinker, even if it's just for now. For now, I want to be an occasional drinker. I'm finding complete sobriety too hard. That can just be that safety valve, that release valve that just actually makes the whole thing easier. Yeah. And then just to reinforce your powerful point, Alex, I think about the all or nothing thinking. Again, I'm sorry to mention, but the Try Dry app, right at the top, it counts the total number of dry days you've had. And so many people on our forums, and it's a pet peeve of mine, they might be drinking heavily. They stop drinking for 50 days, they have a drink, and they go, I'm back to day one. You're not.
No.
You're on day 51.
Yeah.
And the point is in the app, that number stays at 50, and then the next day you have an alcohol-free rate, it'll go up to 51. Those 50 days are not lost. The learning you took from those days is banked. The health benefits, they're all banked. So not feeling that you're back to day one. It's a really common kind of human approach, right? But I think we have to train ourselves out of it.
And I guess for this viewer as well, you did it before and you're starting now with all that knowledge, all that training from the first time round, so you're in a better position now than when you very much started out. Okay.
Now, reconnect with your why, who that person is.
Yes, reconnect you with your why. Okay, the next question, this is for Alex as well. We've had quite a few questions about this topic actually, and the topic generally is around whether alcohol-free options are good for you.
This is a really good question, and I recently did a Channel 4 documentary looking into this, because alcohol-free booze, as we call it, has rapidly grown over the last few years, and people quite rightly ask the question, is it good for you? And I think the first point we have to remember is that, in this glass here I've got water. You can't compare it to water. Clearly water is the best option. The comparison is better made against alcohol and other soft drink alternatives like the kind of colas and things like that. That's a better comparison to make. Now, what is in this stuff? Well, depending whether it's kind of an alternative version of a gin, so an alcohol-free gin or red wine and so on, they do have different constituents of what's in there. But there are common themes. So, for example, if you look at the red wine, the alcohol red wine versus non-alcoholic, they'll both have preservatives like sulfites that are in them. So they're kind of commonalities that have been in red wine for very many years. The big difference clearly is the lack of alcohol. That is obviously going to be beneficial towards your health for the reasons that we've talked about. The important thing to look at, and I think I had learned from the documentary, is that don't always assume that there's going to be low levels of sugar or calories. Some of the drinks have actually really high levels of sugar. In general, when you compare non-alcoholic versus alcoholic, the calories will be lower. So a good example will be red wines. There's about 600 calories in a bottle of red wine. Most non-alcoholic red wines have about 150 calories in them.
Okay.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
If you compare that to, that's a massive difference.
Yeah.
Similarly, beers might have 15-20% of the calories compared to the alcoholic kind of cousins, if you like. So I would see from that perspective, it's great. Check what's on the label. The thing that I found really fascinating actually was that when you look at the back of a bottle, and you can do this at home by the way, grab a bottle of alcohol at home if you've got one, have a look at the back and see where there's nutritional information. Most bottles of alcohol won't have that, but interestingly all alcohol-free drinks must have the nutritional information on the back.
They're classed as a food product.
Exactly, and it does beg the question, why does alcohol not require the same? Why does alcohol not have to have the caloric intake on the caloric amount on there? Why does alcohol?
All the ingredients even.
Why are the ingredients not in alcohol drinks? I thought that was a very interesting question.
It is a very interesting question. Okay, so I think in summary then, are alcohol-free options good for you? Not as good for you as water, but usually better for you than their alcoholic cousins.
Absolutely, for very many reasons. Abstinence of alcohol, not having the alcohol in them, and also, often when we talk about things like sugars and other things, actually, in comparison, much better.
There's actually a single out at the moment about alcohol-free beer.
Right.
And it says it tastes just like the real thing. That's because it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Water, hops, yeast, and malt. Water,
fine.
hops, and that's what it's got in it. Particularly alcohol-free beer, it has got exactly the same product,
not fermented.
but with the alcohol removed, or not with the alcohol put in the first place. So actually, a lot of cases, it is the same product. It'll taste as good, if not better. Yeah. It's interesting that people used to moan about alcohol-free drinks being like quite expensive, but there's a growing group of people that go, well, if I can have a drink that harms me, and a drink that doesn't harm me, which one is more valuable? So it's so interesting, I think, those alcohol-free drinks, I think, we know that 83% of heavy drinkers who successfully cut back find alcohol-free drinks important to that journey.
There you go.
There are a few people, and I think it's important to say this, a few people will find these drinks triggering.
Yeah.
If that's you, fine.
Leave them be.
Don't use them, use something else. Kombucha, orange juice, water.
Sparkling teas, a lovely spiced tea, sparkling teas.
Green teas, there's loads of options.
Well, I think, in this country, going to the pub is such an important part of our culture. It's where we socialise, it's where we get to know our neighbours. But now, to be able to walk into a pub, somebody pull a pint for you of a drink that tastes like lager but has no alcohol in it. We've come on a really long way, and it makes it much more easy for people to be more mindful with their drinking, and just have that thought of, am I having an alcoholic beverage just because my mates are, just because I'm in a pub and that's what's expected, or do I really want one today, or will I have an alcohol-free alternative? It makes it much more accessible, doesn't it?
So true.
Okay then, the final question, and this is for Richard, and I think this is perhaps something that a lot of people will be able to relate to. Recently, I've been really worried about how much my wife is drinking. How can I talk to her about it?
Okay, so yeah, I really understand where this question's coming from, and it's a really common question. We have over 1 million visits to our website a year, and well over a third of those are people not worrying about their own drinking, but worrying about a loved one. I think I'm going to make 3 points. I think the first point is the hardest point, but the most powerful point is you can't change that person. You can't change your wife's behaviour. Only she can do that. But accepting that is actually helpful and empowering. And it's that battle, the bit before you accept that, where you want to make that change for them and you think you can, where a lot of the problems happen. That actually can create conflict in relationships, obviously can create tension, and can make things really difficult for you. So actually accepting that you can't make them change is the first point and the hardest point. A couple of kind of further points actually are a bit more hopeful. Firstly, you can actually talk to them, but you don't want to talk to them when they're drinking or drunk. Take that time out when you're out for a walk together, or you're having a meal where she's not drinking. Having that conversation when you're both clear-headed, being non-accusatory, and being clear that you care for your wife, you're worried about her, and that you'd love her to explore options. And then thirdly, you might have to repeat that. So you might have to repeat that multiple times and it might never work, going back to that first point. The third point, I think, is actually, if you're finding this really challenging, you can actually get help yourself. There's an organisation, for example, called ADFAM, good friends of ours. They offer support for family members of people with an alcohol or drug problem, illegal drug problem. So reach out for help yourself if you're struggling. It's out there, it's free, and it can really help you deal with that first point, that acceptance point. And actually, you role modelling, seeking help, can actually be exactly the thing that your wife might find powerful and might go, gosh, my husband's doing this, I want to do the same.
That's a really helpful answer, Richard. Thank you. And just on this subject, we've obviously been talking about what to do if you're concerned about somebody else, but I also just want to remind our viewers that if any of you are at all struggling or feeling worried about your own drinking, there are plenty of places you can turn to for help, completely confidentially. You can speak to your GP for advice, whether that's in person or using Bupa's digital GP service via the My Bupa app if you're a customer. There's also lots of information on the Alcohol Change UK and Alcoholics Anonymous websites. There you'll find free support and lots of resources to help you. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for. A big thank you to both of our guests, Richard and Alex, and huge thanks to you as well for all of your questions and for joining in. I hope this has given you the tools to make the best decision for you, your body and your life. Keep an eye on your inbox too, as we'll be sending out a recording of this video as soon as we can, and loads more tips on sober curiosity and alcohol-related wellness. I would also love to know what you thought about today's event. So we'll be popping a short questionnaire in the chat and we'd really appreciate your views. Until next time, take care.